All right, welcome back. We are Game 2007. That's multiplayer game design 1 in the winter 2026 semester at Georgian, and it's week 6, part 1 of our broadcast and recording together. And let's take a look at our schedule for this one today. We are adding equipable items, things that we can use, so useful items, not just interactables. Last week we focused on interactables, and we talked about an RPC pattern that we can use in multiplayer. And that RPC pattern was, if you remember, creating a custom event that is multicast, and then having another custom event, that server, called the multicast event. Sometimes we need to do that, and we're going to see that we need to do that today for animations. So those kind of things, when it comes to RPCs, a lot of times remote procedure calls are used for animations and for communicating across the network, making a broadcast. Right, so we've talked about different kinds of ways of doing things. One other thing that we also have to discuss is our midterm test. Again, it says in person here, but that was our schedule. But like I said yesterday, for those people who missed, I will be doing things remote for next week, and the reason for that is because of my challenges right now, at home. Right, so it's like I got some stuff I got to do, support my wife. I know it's really not, people don't care, but I got to tell you, it's the truth, right? It is what it is, right? So, and I was thinking about this, people ask me like, do you think the students will be okay with it, kind of thing. And I know that when I'm taking a class and if my professor's canceling or something like that, I'm like, he's canceled again, it bothers me, right? I don't want you guys to feel bothered. I'm trying to deliver the curriculum as best I can, and I wish I could be there physically next week, but I can't. So it is what it is. So I want to start with a bit of an exam review about things that are going to come up for next week. We're going to create a base interactable, and this base interactable is something that we're going to inherit, as an example for our other interactables that we use right now, which means a little bit of a reworking, and we do that sometimes. And then a couple of equipable items, sword and shield. We won't really have a inventory system yet. We'll start that in the second half of semester, right? But that's something that we're going to be working on. And then once we have those equipable items, and then we'll actually do 2 different animations. We'll talk about animations in Unreal Engine with multiplayer, right? So they're very similar to what you've already done, but we have to activate them in a different way. All right, so that's what's happening. Again, assignment 2 is now due this Sunday, so that assignment's been moved to accommodate, some of these changes. Hopefully that's going to help. So I want to talk about the mid-semester exam that's next week. Again, I've metered it for about 2 hours-ish. You're going to work with our existing multiplayer project up until today. So basically, I'll give you today's project. You'll have that to start. It's not like you're going to start from nothing. It's a lot to do that. And then from there, I'll ask you to do something, add something, adjust something, fix something, one of those kind of things. So that's what I'm going to be asking you to do. It's in line with what I've asked you to do for assignment 1 and assignment 2. So I think it's nothing that's going to be new necessarily. It's just there for you to demonstrate that you know what to do with multiplayer in that mode. How do you demonstrate multiplayer? How does it work and all that stuff? So you may build a new feature, you might modify an existing feature, make Elden Ring 2. Yeah, okay. Love it, but yeah, I don't know if it's a huge task. So you will have to do some kind of report like the other way. Everyone is going to give you these things, some kind of DevOps. You have to do a YouTube video, all that kind of stuff. And then, that's the stuff that's the format of the exam. But really what you're going to be asked for could be some kind of properties. There might be an interactable, like all the same things that you've been doing already is something that you're just going to ask to do more. So nothing that you're going to be doing new. Like it's not like something like concocted out of the top of my head that you haven't done before. So it's nothing to panic about. One good thing is, even though it's slated for about 2 hours-ish, you'll have the entire week to do it. Again, I'm going to try and release this stuff on Sunday, Monday-ish. Monday is family day, so something like that. And then you'll have the rest of the week to get it done. So, it won't take you that long if you're diligent. but there are no extensions on the exams, guys. So when it's due on Friday next week, as an example, it's due on Friday. That means like that's if you don't get it done, it's 20% of your grade, and it is what it is. So please make sure that you plan accordingly. Plan for your time. Some people, what they do is they plan to do it during the time, the class time, because that's how their schedule works, and that's okay, right? I will be around again to answer questions around all the exams, but that's really what I'm going to be asking you to do. Any questions around that before we go on? So again, don't be concerned. Like if you're following along and you understand the basics of multiplayer, then that's what you're going to be tested on. Okay, it's not going to be something that is like wildly wacky or whatever. I'm not going to ask you to use like C++. We haven't done C++ so far with this course, and there are advantages to doing things with C++, like we've talked about before. But we just haven't had a chance to do it, and that's fine. So that's what we're gonna. If you want to use C++, you can, but it won't be that. All right. If you have other questions or whatever around that, I'll take those. But I'm going to continue on. I'm not going to make another video. This is very short, but let's continue. So I want to add equipable items, and what I'm doing is I'm going to start with a copy of last week's project, which is week 5. I'm making week 6, and let's just start that off so that we know where we're at. And this is what I typically do, my friends. I kind of launch our project, make sure that it's working properly, and all that kind of stuff, right? So let's get moving. So please do the same. Make a copy of yours, and so that you have you have a chance to do things. One other thing is I want to mention this again. I know I've said it a bunch of times, but I want to say it again. Please practice. Please do that. Like, I know that it's people will cram and do whatever they have to do at the last minute to get it done, kind of thing. But it's like, it's a lot to do, and to do your exams, especially when you're doing things remote. You gotta have a machine to do it. You know what I'm saying? That's the other thing. Unreal Engine is a bit of a pig to run on a standard laptop. So one thing that if you really want to, if you need to go to the lab to write it there, that's perfectly fine. Like next week, as an example, if you want to write any of the exams in person, even if I'm not there, you can always find security to open the door for you and to get in and do your thing in the lab. So that's also an option. Like, you'll have computers available to you. If you don't have a machine, plan accordingly. So make sure that your machine is capable of running Unreal Engine, at home. Otherwise, that would be a bad thing. All right. So last week we did this. We had our project, and we have a couple of players here. And let me just run around here. And if we go over to a kind of a potion, we can do this. We can kind of go over here to this one, and we can see that it's going to, give us a timing. And what it does is we also fix the problem where when we level up, as an example, it would drop our health. That's something that we fixed from last week, which was a problem, right? So because, we don't want to be penalized for leveling up, right? So that's the thing that happens. So this is the way we do it. We talked about last week, we worked on world space health bars as opposed to screen space health bars. So again, if I was to go into this room, I can't see that health bar for my other player over here, or players, right? And same thing goes with this. You can see if depending on which player I'm playing with, whether it's this one or the other one, it's got to show the health bar in the right thing. We worked hard to try and get the health bars synchronized. Health bars are tricky because they're user interfaces, and because they're part of each individual character themselves, there's a bunch of steps we had to go through to make sure that we can get things working the way they were. All right, so that's what we worked on last week. So this week what we're going to do is we're going to add equipable items that you can actually hold in your hands. In order for us to do that, we're going to start with an equipable type enum, and we're going to do that in the interactables folder. So again, back into the interactables folder here, we're going to add a new enum class. Here we go, called equipable type. E equipable. Now, I could put EE together. I just use the underscore there because it's the same, like EE, two E's, weird. There's different, things we want to add in. None is an option, so it's not equipable. And that might be something like a coin or something else like that. That's not really equipable. It's like consumable in some ways, right? We have a consumable. That's more like a potion, right? Or something that you're going to use. A tool. Let's say, for example, you had like some kind of, instead of a weapon, you had a pickaxe or something like that where you want to dig through something or gather resources. You might also have a right-handed weapon. And sometimes we might, instead of putting weapon, we might use the word implement, right? Because it could be a tool or it could be a weapon. Some people do that. Left-handed weapon, as well as a two-handed weapon. So weapons could be, in our parlance, could also be considered things like shields, defenses, other kinds of things. Anything you're going to hold in your hands, left hand, right hand, both hands, kind of thing, would be something like this. So that's the first thing we did. We added this E equipable type. All right, so file, save all. So again, I've already taken the liberty of making a week 6 DevOps folder in the GAME2007 project so that you guys can get moving on that. So now that we've done that, what we want to do is we want to create a new widget blueprint, because my thoughts are that I'd like to have some kind of indicator that it's something that you can pick up, okay? So again, it's just an option. It doesn't mean that all games would use something like this or whatever, clearly not. But I would call this, it's a user widget, and it's going to be called widget blueprint interact key, the interact key. So the interact key is going to just be the E key that's going to hover over objects that you can interact with, okay? Depending on the game, some games have that where you have E or T or something like that that tells you what key to use to interact with it. So that's what we're going to do here. So I want to pull in a canvas. Here's my canvas. And then when that canvas, I'm going to pull in a text object. Here it is, text block. I'm going to make the anchors in the middle. So we're going to just zero these out here, which is important to do. I'm going to make it a kind of a height of 80, right, and an alignment of 0.5, 0.5. All stuff we've done before, nothing new here. Color, I'm going to just choose the color is going to be yellow, that kind of thing. My font is going to be Roboto, but I think I've used something like font size 70. And it doesn't say it on the PowerPoint, but I found that when we do this kind of stuff, here's E, right? When we do this kind of stuff, I want it centered so that E is centered inside of this block. I want to be able to do that. And I also want to add in an outline. Let's say something like an outline size of 2. It's okay for it to be black. So the outline is going to be like this, what it's going to look like. The E that's going to float on top of stuff when I want to interact with it, right? So it's going to tell the user, hey, you can interact with this thing. When you're positioned properly. If you're not positioned properly, if you're not actually looking at the object, then you won't be able to interact with it. You have to kind of be close to it or whatever. All right, so that's the interactable. Then we want to call this interact key, right? So we're going to rename the, not the panel, but this part, interact key. And I definitely want to make it a variable. So that's what I'm going to do here. So compile and save. So that is your WBP interact key, and that's all we have to do for this one. Okay, nothing else crazy. We can close that off. Once we have it, we have that interact key, so I'm going to kind of put that in. So I'm going to kind of add that into DevOps here. So again, git add dot. There we go. So I've done that. So what I want to do now is I want to make something called a base interactable. And the base interactable, what this is going to do is it's going to be the base class for, if you will, for multiple other classes, other base classes, as an example. Like, for example, I want base potion to inherit from base interactable. Now, this is going to be a bit of a disruption because we need to do some rework. So I'm going to take base potion and duplicate it. Now, there's some changes we have to make when we do this kind of thing, and I'm just going to point this out to you. So go back to interactable, go to potions, go to base potion, right click and duplicate, right? We'll call this BP underscore base interactable. That's what we're going to do there. Here's my base interactable. And I want to take this base interactable and I want to just move it into the interactable folder. So just move it out one level. There we go. So it's out here with the equipable, right? So it's in the interactables folder. I want to change the image so it doesn't look like this. My potion mesh, I mean, we're not going to just make potions. We're going to make all kinds of interactables. So there's some things we're going to remove from this whole thing. I like the interactable radius. That's going to stay. But I want to get rid of the potion mesh. I want to rename this to item mesh because it could be any interactable item. So let's rename it to item mesh, right? That's what's going to be there. So the other thing is that, you know, there are some things that are good here that we're going to keep and some things that we're going to remove. So for example, having an activate potion for the interactable is not something that we're going to keep. We're going to remove some of this stuff. Again, we could have started from scratch, but I think this is just easier. Item mesh is, I want to change this to a crate just to, so it looks like something else. So there is a kind of a standard crate that looks like this. So I'm just going to change it so that we know it's our base interactable. It's not our base potion anymore. All right, so that's the first thing. I'm going to, once I've done that, I want to add in an interact key. Let's do that. So let's add that interact key, and notice that it's kind of a child of interactable radius. So again, interactable radius, we'll add in a widget component. That's what it is. Here's a widget component. We'll call this interact key. There we are, interact key. The widget component, two things to note about this. If I go to viewport right now, then it is here, but we need to you know, kind of select at the beginning the widget blueprint we're going to use for our interactable, for our the widgets. We're going to use this one, the same name, interact key. If I was to put this higher, it kind of looks like this, right, where it's kind of floating over the object. I think 150 is a good spot to put it at because there's going to be different sizes. I think this is a good spot to, you know, good place to put it. Now, I don't want it in world space. This is one where if I'm close enough, I want to be able to see it like through the door. I don't want to be able to make two of them. Like, what if I'm on the other side of the door and I'm interacting with it? Do I have to make, because otherwise I'd have to make two, right? Because then it only appears in world space. It's going to appear somewhere. And it's got to be somewhere where it's automatically doing some things for me. So for now, what we're going to do is we're going to make this in world space, but we're going to change it to screen space later. And I'll talk about this. So that's the first thing. Okay. Next, once we have this stuff, we want to make it invisible by default. So again, I'm just clicking on the interact key. I'm going to go to visible, and I'm going to uncheck it. The safe thing to do for these things, by the way, for both the item mesh and the interact key, is to make them both replicated components. I think it's a good, safe thing to do. So if I go to replicate, notice it says component replicates. I'm going to replicate my interact key, and I'm also going to replicate my item mesh, okay, which I didn't do before. So that's something that I'm going to be doing now, so that I know that that item mesh is going to be something that I'm going to see across different objects. Okay, so that's number one. Now that I have that, what I want to also do is the interact key should not like interfere with my interaction. We saw that when we created you know, something else, you know, that interacts. We don't want that to happen. Like, for example, our health bar interacted with our own you know, kind of interactable we kind of have this like sphere cast that we're doing equivalent in front of us, right? Perform sphere trace. That sphere trace can interact or be interfered with if there's something else. So we want to turn all that off. So again, I'm going to click on the interact key, and I want to go to collision. And what I want to do here is, instead of UI, I want to make custom, and I just want to ignore everything. I want to ignore it, and I also want to generate overlap events. I want to uncheck that. Okay, so that's something I'm going to do. Item mesh is already set up the way it's supposed to be, so it does ignore most things, right? Here's something that we're going to ignore, but what we want to do for our door is, the door isn't going to be something you can walk through. So we're going to change this for the door. It's going to be some slight differences because, again, the door is going to be a type of interactable. We just don't want to, walk right through it. But by default, the item mesh is going to be something that you don't like actually collide with, right? All right, so that's kind of the second thing. The third thing we want to do is add in some variables, but I also want to delete other potion-related variables and functions. So a good example of that is potion type, potion amount, F effect count, and has ongoing effect. That was great for our potions, but it has nothing to do with us. And activate potion and select effect are two functions we want to get rid of. So let's do that. Select effect is gone, right? It says it's in use. Well, yeah, it's in use because we're using it here in activate potion with our event interact. So I'm just going to delete this whole thing. So we're not going to do that. And I'm just going to get rid of activate potion and select effect. We're going to get rid of those two things because those are going to clash when we, kind of inherit these things. Same thing with potion amount. So potion amount is gone, potion type is gone, effect count is gone, has ongoing effect is gone. Again, I'm only modifying my base interactable, and I'm just changing the stuff that doesn't make any sense for other interactables, right? There's some things I want to keep. One thing is my interfaces. I definitely want my interact interface because it's, when you inherit from this one, you'll be inheriting the interface as well, right? Interactor is within radius. I want to keep that. And notice it also, if I look at my replicated state, it's replicated. Well, I want to add in these items, and they should all be replicated as well. So let's add in a few more Booleans. So is consumable would be a Boolean that I want to use that's also replicated. There we go. Is consumable, is equipable. I want to keep track of if an item is equipable. By the way, we can also use other things here. Instead of using Booleans, Booleans are positive and negative, but sometimes it'll be equipable but not consumable, or both. It's equipable and consumable, right? So that's why it's like, sometimes Booleans are okay for that perspective, right? So again, I want to just use this replicated. Equipable type. So I want to do that next. Equipable type. And that's that new. Let's try that again. That's that new equipable type, this one. Again, I also want to make that replicated. And then finally has owner. As owner, and that's going to be a Boolean. Add in, that's important to have. So far, my begin overlap and end overlap events stay, right, so far. Next, I want to add in the ability for me to billboard components. So billboard component, I can use it for a lot of different things, right? Like, for example, I have some components right now that I'm using that are billboarding. For example, my health bar, right? Billboard component is also something that I can write inside of a function library, right? A blueprint function library, because billboard component is something that I can use in my interactable as well as my health bar or anything else that I want to billboard. I want something to look at the camera or whatever. So there's lots of options here. For me, I'm going to put this as part of my by default, I'm going to add it into my interact key, but you'll see that we'll modify this later. So billboard component I'm going to make as a new function. So again, we could move this. There's lots of options here, but we can move this somewhere else. I want to add in the component is of type scene component, which means it could be any component that you want, right? Scene component is the superclass of all other components, right? So if we want any component to be billboarded, like look at the camera, then you can specify it. It's not just for my health bar or whatever. It could be anything you want to, anything that you want to have the player see. Okay, and then all we're going to do is, you know, get player controller. So same thing that we've done before. So we're going to take this, get player controller, and we're going to get the player camera manager. Camera manager basically is like, you know, where the camera is looking, the forward of the camera, and we're going to get the camera location, get camera location, and that's kind of something that we want to use. We also want to get the component, this one here, so get component, and that's the component from the function component here, and I want to get the world location, get world location, and that get world location is something that I'm going to use find look at rotation from, which is going to basically find the solution, the rotation that I have to go from my my component that I'm looking at to the camera. So where's the camera? I'm looking over here, but the camera's over there. I want to, you know, rotate towards the camera. That's what this is going to be. By the way, you can also do this kind of look at rotation like we've done before with interop. You know, basically we're going to interpolate, you know, between one thing and the other, so slow rotation as opposed to you know, a snapping rotation. But we're going to find this lookout rotation, and I want to break this as a rotator. So if I go break rotator, all it's going to do is it's going to create this. I could have done it here as well, but then it makes this node difficult to understand what this is. That's why I break the rotator here. And then the same thing is I want to make rotators. So make and break, make rotator. And then I don't need all the parts of my rotator, my quaternion here. I only need some of it. So just those two. I don't care about the roll at all, because then it'll be weird. And so then I want to take the component and set world rotation for that. So get the component again and set world rotation for the component because it's in world space. And we want to just connect these two up like so. And that's really the function. So the function is really a utility function. That's why I you know, again, I think about using some kind of function library that'll do this, because we might use this, you know, billboard. We're going to billboard something multiple times. All right, so that is our billboard component. And then what we can do is we can, for now, we can use it. So we can use the interact key to billboard. So if to test it, so again, what I would do is in the event graph and in the event tick, we don't have that, but if I go event tick, then I can say, hey, interact key, here it is. I want to billboard component. And then now you can see that it's going to, every tick, every frame, it's going to look towards the camera. That's what this thing does. Yay. All right, the other thing I want to do is I want to have two functions, two custom events. And I'm making them custom events for a couple of reasons. One, they're more versatile than functions. We can always make them so that they're run on the server. Functions you cannot. That's what the good thing about custom events are. And I'm going to plan the potential to use those. So perform item rotation is what I want to do. So that's something that we can do. We also have that too, right? So I want to add a custom event that I want to call perform item rotation. And I want to add another one, add custom event that is perform item, I think it's bounce, perform item bounce. I want to bounce it up and down, right? We've kind of done this from last semester, right? We did these kind of things. But now I want to make them so that anyone can use them. Again, this is also really good to use in a function library. If you're going to use this in multiple things, you're going to use them. You don't have to inherit this for the other things to use. So let's make two things. Let's make a timeline, add timeline. And we've done this before. So this is going to be the item rotation. So item rotation, right? And if I double click onto it, it'll open up another graph. I want to add a new float track called rotation underscore Z, and I want to make it looping. Here's the looping part. I want to add in another key. The key is going to start off at 0 time and 0 degrees. That's what that's going to be, you know, kind of thing. And then I'm going to add another key where I'm going to go, and this is going to be 5 seconds, and it's going to be 360 degrees. So that's something that I want to do. When I go from 0 to 360, you can see this if you kind of use these two items to scale. So you can see it's just a linear, you know, kind of like rotation. And remember that 360 is 0, just the other side of 0. So even if it just keeps going back and forth to this, it's kind of rotating forever. And it's a better way of rotating, like I said before, than using a tick function to do that. We don't want to use a tick function. So that's one. And I want to set actor rotation. So set actor rotation, and that is going to be the new rotation. We're going to split the struct pin here, and I'm going to use the Z only. That's the only thing I want to rotate on right here. And it's going to happen on update. So on update, this is where it's going to use. We're going to use that the new float track to do that. Okay, so that is the first one. The other one that I want to do is I want to add another timeline. So add timeline, and this one's going to be called item bounce. I'm also going to double click on this, and I'm going to make so it's looping. I want to add a new float track, and we're going to call this location Z. There we are. It's going to only have a time frame of 2 seconds this time, so it's going to take 2 seconds to bounce up and down every 2 seconds. I want to have the initial key, which is going to have a time of 0 and a value of 40 units. So it's going to have 40 units above the ground. That's where it's going to start. And then I'm going to add another key where it's going to be a time of 1 and a value of 120. So it's going to go up to the kind of up that way. And if I was to look at those things, you can see that those are the two keys right now. One more key. I'm going to add another third key. And this third key is going to be a time of 2 and a value of 0 again. Oh, sorry, not 0, 40. 40. And again, what I want to do is I want to kind of look at what it looks like here. Oops, undo. And so it kind of looks like it goes up and it comes down. It goes up and it comes down. Now, if you want to make it hover at the top and then come down and do one of these, like a nice smooth rotation, you can just make this into a curve as opposed to what I've done here. Okay, but it's perfectly fine this way as well. So now I have my other timelines. I have two timelines, one that does bounce up and down, and the other one that does rotation. And then now this one is a little bit different because I need to get the actor location. So get actor location, and that is the actor, which is my interactable, whatever that interactable is. I want to split the struct pin here, and I don't care about the Z this time. I only want to change my X and Y, right? So that's what's going to kind of pass through to my set actor location. So set actor location, I just want to pass that through, right? So it's not going to be affected by that on update. So again, new location, I'm going to split the struct pin. I'm just going to pull these through like this. So in other words, I'm not changing my actor location. I'm just changing the Z axis here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my new Z value from my timeline, this motion graph that we created, and this way it's a little bit easier for us to do. So again, we've done this stuff before, nothing is new here. Okay, and that's what these two things are. Next, I want to modify my overlap events, so we're keeping them, right? So going back to my overlap, if you look at the event graph, I have two overlap events and an event tick. So let's go to my begin overlap. This is the first one. And my begin overlap, I'm just going to make it a little bit more juicy. What I want to do here is the only thing I want to add is a reference to the character. So right now we cast as BP_MP character, and I want to capture that character that we're interacting with. So I'm going to promote to a variable. We're going to call this character. And that character variable is going to be set when I cast for the first time, when I'm interacting with the item, whatever that thing is. I want this character also to be replicated, so I know which one it is, because it's going to be multiple. You can have multiple players interacting, right? So that's why we need to do that. And then I want to do the same thing here. When I'm done interacting, then I want to, clear the reference to the character and make it null pointer. So when I leave the interactable, there's no, that character is wiped out. Okay, that's what I want to do. So again, I'm just going to pass in, this, and I want to make it so that I'm not connecting anything here. I'm just literally just disconnecting. When I disconnect it like this, then this becomes null pointer, right? So that's something that I want to do here. Compile and save. Next, what I want to also do, I'll leave the billboard in for now. But what I want to do here is I want to make it so that my visibility from my interactable actor is going to change. So let's check this out. So I want to get a reference to my character. So here's my get, but I want to make it a validated get. A validated get, again, remember my friends, right click, and we want to do convert to validated get. Okay, that's what this does. So this validated get basically says, it's like me saying, can I cast to, this again, instead of me casting or check to see if it's valid, is another way of doing that same thing. So there's two options. There's two executable pins, is valid and is not valid, which is cool. And we also get the reference to the character itself. So what I want to do is I want to get the interactable actor. So get interactable actor, the thing that I'm interacting with. That's what this thing is. All right. So that's the related actor. And then so that's basically what's the character interacting with. Is it a coin? Is it a door? What are they interacting with? Well, whatever that is, we'll check to see if that object is valid too. Is valid, right? Because we also don't want to have, if there's no interactable actor, which is possible, like for example, they're not interacting with anything right now, then the interactable actor, which is held in the character, is going to be blank. It's going to be null, right? So if it's not null, if it's not valid, that means they're not interacting with anything, right? So branch. And I'm using this check to turn off the interact key. That's what this whole thing is. Check to see if there's no interactable actor, something that they're not interacting with. In other words, I'm performing a sphere trace, right? And let's suppose I'm not looking at the thing that I'm supposed to be interacting with. That means there's no interactable actor because my sphere trace is missing. It's kind of over here somewhere else, right? And because it's not actually connecting with or overlapping with the interactable actor, therefore I shouldn't show my interact key. I shouldn't show the E. The only time I want to show the E key is if it's time to interact. That's what I want to do. All right, so here's my branch, and what I want to do is I want to get that interact key now, and I want to set the visibility. Here's my set visibility. I want to set it to false, because if it's true that I'm not interacting with anything, then don't show me anything. That's what this is. That's what this little check does. That's what this whole part here does. Now I could make, drop this into a function, collapse it into a function, and call something like check, interactable or something like that. But that's what it is so far. Compile and save. All right, so that's the first part. So the first part is the interact key is billboarding, and then it's not going to show up at all unless I'm looking at it. That's what this part is right here. Okay, so now this is the tricky part. So now that I have all of this, this is my base interactable. Compile and save. Let's put this up on DevOps. So we'll say git add dot git commit -m. We'll say created BP underscore base interactable, right? So that's this part. Then what I want to do is I want to inherit from this blueprint as opposed to something else. So if I go back to, I'm just going to close that down. If I go back to my potions, my base potion right now is inheriting from the actor superclass, the actor class, right? I don't want potions to inherit from the actor class anymore. I want to inherit from my base interactable because it's an interactable and I want to be able to identify it as such, right? All right, so how do I do that? So I go into my class settings, and it's going to give you a warning in a second, but I want to go to BP underscore base interactable. When I do, it says following interfaces are already implemented. Continue reparenting. Why? Because my base interactable, or my base potion, already implements my BI, or my blueprint interface, which is the interactable interface. It already implements this. If I click reparent, then what happens is now, hopefully it's not going to crash. Don't crash. It crashed. Yeah, it happens sometimes when we do this kind of stuff. But that's why I did that commit, right? Because, guys, it's very clear, like when we do this kind of stuff, what I'm showing you, because when as we're coding, if I had a problem right here, I could have lost all the stuff that I was working on, and that would be very bad, right? So that's why I urge you guys to always use, kind of the stuff that we're doing. Okay, so let's see what happens. Let's see if it's going to happen again. And let's see why it didn't happen, because it didn't happen. You can see it's still actor, right? So let's go back to my base interactable. See if I lost anything. So here we are. Here's my base interactable, and I want to check to see that it's all here. It is, right? We have this part, the interact radius and all that stuff, which is already happening, right? So I'm kind of doing this twice, which is kind of interesting. Base potion, we don't have to do this anymore, so we can probably get rid of all of this. Maybe that's why it crashed. So let's get rid of this, just to make it easy. So we don't have to do that anymore. So no more of that. That's handled now on the base interactable side, right? And just for now, the event interact, all I'm going to do is just remove it and put it back. Okay, so that's the one thing. Also, interactor is within a radius. That's something that is going to be inherited, as an example, from my base interactable. So that's something that's going to be, we may have to get rid of this, okay, just for a second. But compile and save. Let's see if we can still do it. So I'm going to go back to, and we're going to do one step at a time, go back to class settings and try again. So again, I'm going to just pull down BP underscore base interactable. It's going to ask me if I want to do this. Do I want to reparent? And I'm going to click reparent. Now remember, if it crashes again, then it's crashing because something else is happening. So let's read to see what's happening here, because it says it crashed, but why? So let's take a look. So it says variable set handler, private. It says, and it kind of talks about, we have to kind of go back. This is our kind of our stack that it's running on. We kind of go from the bottom up. So it can says Windows, C++, and it's going to tell you somewhere in here what the problem is. A Slate application. Oops, that's not that. It's this part. I'm going to make this bigger. Here he has public delegates. Then there's other stuff. Then blueprint details, blueprint editor, and it goes up to here, compile manager, compiler, and then it's a variable set handler. That's the last thing we said. And then there's a editor graph node, as an example, is having an issue. That's what it's coughing along, right? So the reasons why you might have this problem, I don't know if you guys had the same problem if you tried this out. The reasons why sometimes this happens is because there's already stuff that's clashing. There's two variables named the same, something like that, and it doesn't like it. So again, I'm just going to relaunch the project, and we'll work through it. Again, this is a really good thing. I'm glad that it's crashing, because then if we can kind of talk about how to deal with this, right? Also, because our base interactable now is going to be something that if our base potion is inheriting from base interactable, well, then so does our regen potion inherits from base potion. So right now, notice that it has these things, and select effect, a couple things that happens, right? It uses the effect count and that kind of stuff in a reference to the character. So there's nothing really here. Has ongoing effect is local to this. This is not really where we have a problem. So this is not, I don't think there's an issue here. But I do know that activate potion, if I look there, it uses interactor is within radius. That's what we kind of use, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just delete this right now. And I'm going to put a note. on here. And I do this sometimes where I kind of go through. I want to make nothing that clashes. That's what I want to do. So I want to make it red. And I'll say something like, need to replace interactor is within radius. Something like that. So I can note that something is missing from this branch. Replace interactor is within radius. Okay? That's what's happening there. Compile and save. All right, that's the first thing. So I disconnected this. Interactor is within radius. If I get rid of it now, right, then there isn't a clash because there's nothing here anymore. Select effect, activate potion, none of this stuff. The only thing that's now in effect is my interfaces, and because I've deleted it, I might as well go back into my my class settings, and I want to remove a reference to my base interactable. So let's just get rid of it like so. It says, would you like to transfer the interface functions to be part of your blueprint? No, because we don't have any interface functions. We're gone. They're done. Okay. So I've done this so that I've freed up stuff from my my base potion, right? Now remember, the other thing that's going to happen is we should also check our BP regen, because now we have an issue because there is no interact stuff. So we're going to get rid of this too, just to make sure that there's no cascade of problems as we go through. Compile and save. Okay, so there we go. Nice. Okay, so now that we've done that, if I go back to my base potion, let's try this again. So again, file, save all, right? And let's try it one more time. See, because we've just removed stuff. That's all we're doing. So again, I'm going to go back to my base interactable, right? And it shouldn't crash. If it does, something else is going on. Something else is happening, that's causing this issue, right? That has nothing to do with me necessarily. It has something else. Well, maybe it has something to do with me, but it's not. So Kismet compiler, it's private variables. Again, I don't see anything that's supposed to be mine. Is yours crashing, guys? Because maybe it's just a me problem. Slates, applications. Worst case, I'm just going to redo the base potions, like that kind of stuff. It's not that difficult to do. Are you guys having trouble as well? Because it shouldn't be. Shouldn't be. But shoulda, woulda, coulda. Sometimes it is. So let's see if we can inherit. We'll make another thing, and we'll inherit from it. Kind of thing. Let's see if that will crash. Because again, now we're using stuff that's in, here. I'll actually remove them as well, just to make sure there's no item that is interfering. Kind of thing. So we can troubleshoot. So I'm going to make a brand new item, right? We'll just call this, temp interactable or something like that. And what I'll do is I'll make it so that it is. So I'll make a new blueprint class, and it will inherit from BP base interactable, this one. And let's see if that just crashes my code. So that didn't do it, right? So we'll call this like temp, whatever. And so that's not it. So that's not the thing. So I get my interact key and my item mesh, and we're good to go. So that is good to go. I see I have my interact radius and all that stuff, and all the things that I want are here. So that's not the thing. That's not it. It's not like it can't work. It's something that's clashing with my base interactable and my potion. So let's just get rid of that for a second. Delete. And let's keep continuing to look and see what else it could be, right? Because there's something else. So if I go back to the base potion, what else could it be? Well, I have an interactable radius. That's also something else that we can have, and we're going to get that back. So that's also a clash, and so is my potion mesh. So again, let's just get rid of that. So potion mesh and interactable radius. Well, let's see if select effect uses those. So I don't use that here, right? I don't use that here. What about my activate potion? Do I use it in here? So no. So none of those two use it, right? Because if it did, what about in my event graph? No, there's nothing in here. So there's nothing in here because it just basically says potion type. So that's not there. And there's nothing in my activate potion because my activate potion doesn't use anything either. All right, so that's gone. And we've removed my stuff. So really, if I just kind of get rid of my potion mesh, and if I was to kind of delete that interactable. I mean, we've literally just now gone down to the bare bones. There's nothing else that's here that should, clash. Maybe character. Maybe because character also exists in my base interactable here, so that could be something that's also clashing. Compile and save. Let's try this one more time, because again, if I have to, I'll just recreate everything from scratch, and I don't mind doing that. So let's try it. So again, I'm going to go back to class settings. I'm going to go file, save all, just to make sure that everything is saved, right? And base potion, let's just kill this one, just to make sure we're not confused. And under class settings, I want to change this to BP underscore base interactable, and it's going to crash again. I can tell because it paused, right? So something is really bugging it, and it has something to do with my base potion. Happens. By the way, this is not how it went when I was testing this out earlier today. Which is perfectly fine. All right, let's get rid of my local variable. So we are, well, that's local variable. Is there, what could it be? My event graph is empty. My select effect is using character and potion amount and effect count. And it's using a, it's connecting to character. And here's character, which is set owner, coming into that. Here's my activate potion, which also casts this to character and replaces this part. And here's calling select effect. I mean, really, there's nothing going on, man. Default scene root. It's bizarre. It just doesn't like it for some reason. Nothing in the viewport. And I'm not getting any feedback. So again, I mean, it's a buggered class for whatever it is. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to start deleting stuff. So, potion amount, potion type, effect count, and has ongoing effect, are all things I'm going to have to recreate, because it's having a problem. So let's make a brand new one called base potion 2, and I'll use this as a basis of this one. So let's just do that. So I'll make a new one. So blueprint class of type BP underscore base interactable. There we are. And we'll call this BP underscore base potion 2. And then what I'll do is in here, I'll start renaming stuff and adding the things I need. It is what it is, guys. So I'm not going to kind of flubber with it. It is what it is. So let's put this in as potion small red. There we are. Potion small red, right? Potion weird. Bizarre. Yeah, there's my potion, and then it's all bizarre, my friends, all bizarre. So I'm just going to pull this out so you can't see it, but I'm just going to just use it in another window here so I can quickly reconstruct this thing instead of wasting your time. And I do apologize. Again, I don't know why it's doing that, but it seems that there's certain things it just doesn't like. So it is what it is. Let's add in a potion amount. So potion amount, which is going to be a float type. And potion amount is replicated, as well as potion type, which is going to be potion type. Potion type. There we go. And that is also replicated, I believe it is. And there's also effect count, which is going to be of type integer. replicated, and like so, compile and save. And finally, it has ongoing effect, which is a Boolean. Weird. I'm upset because that didn't happen earlier. That's why, you know, Logan, he asked me, you know, can you release stuff? And I go, I got to test it first. And of course, I test it, and it still messes up. Doesn't matter. So we just have to move on. So then now it's going to be select effect. That's going to be the next one. So let's make that one happen. So that'll be inside of my functions. So select effect. There we are. And select effect takes in a character. So that's the input, which we're going to make it character. And we're going to call this type. We're not casting, so it's going to be of type BP underscore MP character. Object reference, there it is. And then from there, I'm going to get character, and I'm going to set owner to, actually I'm going to set the owner to this. This is going to be the owner. The character is going to be the owner of this potion. If it has ongoing effect is true, then I want to branch. And what I want to do with it is there's two options. I'm going to go with the potion type, get potion type, and I'm going to say switch on potion type if it's a health or speed potion, right? And I want to do this twice because, you know, whether it's has an ongoing effect or doesn't, I still, if I have a speed potion in the future, which I will, then I want to do this. And then I want to call the character class that I want to call. So get character. There we go. And I want to start healing multicast. Start healing multicast is what I want to do. Right, so this is going to do it. And the potion amount is what I want to heal, how much I want to heal, and then the effect count is what I want to use. There we go. So that's what this does, and then finally I want to destroy the actor. We did that last time. But what about if it's not something that has an ongoing effect? Well, then I want to use add health. And that's going to use my health amount, which is the potion amount, one time. And there we go. And that is that part. And it's going to dovetail into this. So that is your select effect function. Now, one thing we don't have here is the potion amount. By default, we can set this up, compile and save. Potion amount by default is 3. The potion type is going to be a health potion. And the effect count is 1 by default. Has ongoing effect is off, so compile and save. So that is your has the selected effect. Now the activate potion is actually a smaller function where we say that it takes in a character instigator. This is kind of my remake, which is going to be of type character object reference. There we go. We want to cast to BP underscore MP character. If it passes, then what we want to do is we want to promote to a local variable called character. If I can actually type character. Ah, look at that. It doesn't like that I'm trying to promote to a local variable because character already exists, right? So we'll call this MP character. That's what the problem was, my friends. Here it is. This is it. This is what was clashing. MP character, right? And again, the reason why this happened is because we have a global character as in the BP base interactable that we're capturing, and then we have a local reference to our character. So now the question is, do I need to check? As an example, do I need just to use the character as opposed to do this? Because if you think about it, if I'm interacting with a potion, then I already have a reference to the character. And to show you this is where the reference is here. If I go to my base interactable, here it is, right? My base interactable does this. It says, okay, get a reference to the character and save it here as character, right? That's something that we have, okay? And character should also be replicated if I'm not wrong. Let me just make sure that it is. So replicate it, right? So that's something that's there, okay? And then what's happening is if I'm interacting with it, then I can activate the effect. If I press the E key, I'm interacting with it, I have a character that's something that's valuable, then if it's not, I can check, I can do a null check, and if it's not null, then I can do it. So that's something else instead of me casting here in this base potion. I don't have to do this anymore. I can just, whatever this character instigator is, I can just, hope that it's this thing. So I can try and do that. That's something that I can do. But for now, I'm going to keep this code the way it was because it worked. And what I want to do is I want to get the, interactor is within radius. So get interactor is within radius. That comes from the base interactable we just made. I want to branch. This is just replacing the stuff we had there in red. And then if it's true, then I want to select effect. So I want to say that the MP character, and I want to select effect. There we go. Select effect. Here we go. All right, so that is everything from my previous functionality that I had before. Okay, compile and save. Now, this base potion that I had before, I can get rid of it. But before we do that, what I have in my potions are two things. My base potion is this, and my BP underscore regen potion is this, right? So I want the regen potion, and by the way, let's file save all before it crashes again. I want my regen potion to use my new base potion. So instead of base potion, I'll use base potion 2. There it is. And let's see if it crashes, right? Yes, I will accept the data loss if it crashes. So compile and save. Then what I got to do is, because now it has an interact radius and it has an item mesh instead of a potion mesh, we need to change this from potion red to potion green. Potion small green. There we go. That has to change, right? And now when I have this, I'm going to go back to my base potion and get rid of it. So that's kind of a long way around to do it. Delete. And now we're back to where we were before. Let's rename this now to base potion, because now we can, because we've deleted the other one. We should be able to do this no problem. And now we fixed our problem the long way, which is kind of, now there is one thing we didn't do with base potion is we don't have the interact function working. So let's put that back in too. So I'm going to get the interact function, and it's going to call activate, potion. That's what it's going to call. The character instigator is going to be passed through. There we go. And it's going to do the same thing for the regen potion. So interact, and then the activate potion. Activate potion. There we go. And that's going to do one of these. Okay, there we go. So that covers everything. Now the one thing that we don't have in my regen potion is the settings. So potion mode is 2, health is the type of potion, effect count is 3, ongoing effect is checked. These are all things we have to do. One thing I also want to do is, it's not equipable, it's only consumable. So it has to be only consumable, something we can consume right now. And same thing with my base potion. My base potion is also not equipable, it's just consumable. So that's something that we want to do. All right, compile and save. Let's test those things out by pushing these two things out here. So here's my potion, and here's my other potion. And now let's check to see if my character still is able to interact with it. So I'm going to go over here, and if I kind of take it, I get healed, and this one should give me healing to the max. There we go. And if I pick some up stuff, so I'm back to where I was before. Before I had this kerfuffle, I fixed my problem the long way. That's how you would do it. Okay, so now that I have these things, yay, that's awesome. We can continue where we were. I'm just going to push this up to DevOps. I'm going to say git add dot, because we have a working thing. Git commit -m. We'll say fixed bug, crashing bug with potion inheriting from base interactable. Just so I know what it was. Okay, so that's that. But back to this. So I've made some changes, and I said it was tricky. What I want to do in my base potion is I want to make it so that it's rotating and bouncing. So back to that. So let's try that. Let's say that all potions now, they're going to be rotating and bouncing by default. So that would be in the event tick. So the parent event tick, let's see what's going on in there. So if I go back to my base interactable, we have an event tick that's firing. I don't want to delete my event tick. I want to keep this. So I want to use the parent event tick plus something else. Now, here's the thing. If I do that, then my interact key from my potion billboards. Otherwise, it won't. And I want my potion to billboard. And I also want to check to see if it's billboarding properly. So that's why I need to keep the parent tick as well as my interact tick. So I want to kind of drag from here, and I want to say something like, which is what I want to do is the bouncing and the perform item rotation. Well, that should be in event begin play. Haha. Let's not do it in the wrong place, because that would be bad. So that's up here. So we'll say perform item rotation and perform item bounce. We don't need to do the overlap event, but I'll leave this event in place like this. Compile and save. If I do this now, and if I press play, we'll see that my potion is right there, and it bounces up and down. Yay. Now, here's the trick. If I go near enough, what I want is when I'm interacting, then I want the E to come up. That's what I want to do. I can still interact with it. It'll still give me the effect that I want, right? That's something that's happening still. But I don't want it to interact the way it would before. So far, so good. We've made this work. Back to where we were. So in the event interact, right, notice that the set relative location for the wooden door. We're going to do the same thing for the wooden door blueprint now without it crashing, okay? So, so that's something we're going to do next. All right, so let's see how we're going to do that. So back to this. So base potion is done. Base interactable is done. Let's go back to the doors, and let's change our wooden door, which is what this thing is, okay? So for the wooden door, we have in the event graph this event interact, and I just want to get rid of the static mesh, because static mesh is going to be replaced. Okay, we know that that's going to happen because we're going to get the item mesh. So that's something that we're going to get rid of. So this and this static mesh is gone. In fact, let's just get rid of the static mesh altogether so we know it's not going to clash. Door open has nothing to do with anything else. Interact is something that we're doing. That's the event interact right here. So I'm just going to uncheck that right now and put it back in a second so that event interact isn't clashing. Then I'm going to go back to class settings, and I'm going to not implement the interface at all. So bam, it's gone, right? And then I can get rid of that can interact function. Now I'm just going to use the base interactable as the thing I'm interacting with, and now it worked, but I have a bit of issues because here we can't set relative rotation to nothing. It needs to go with the item mesh. So item mesh is the target. That's what we're changing up here. And root we don't need anymore, so root is gone. Compile and save. The item mesh, if I look at the viewport, is this, but we don't want to make that a crate. We want to use the wooden door. That's this one, right? What we had before was that it was inverted, so -1. Sorry, let's go back to that. Undo. Uncheck this, and then do -1. -1, which inverts the door. Okay, that's what we did. We need to make some changes. So a couple things, right? For the door itself, it's special compared to the other things. It's not like a potion, right? So, you know, so a couple things for this one. It's not consumable. It's not equipable. And the equip type is none. I'm not equipping it at all. It doesn't have an owner. The door is not open right now. It's closed by default. And it's going to keep track of if the item is within radius. Okay. The item mesh needs to move a bit. So we did all this, but let's tag in the interact event again. So again, I'm just going to kind of double click on the interact event and just tag that back in. I just disconnected it temporarily. All right, so that way it's there. We've also connected the item mesh. So if I compile and save now, we're good to go again. All right, that's how it was. But we need to make some changes to the door. The location should be at -200. So again, if I go back to the viewport for the door, and if I go location is -200 on the Y, -200, it's going to slide it over. That's what I want it to be. And then the interact radius should be bigger. It should be 400 instead of 200. Let's do that. So it's slightly bigger than this. The interact key, let's change that a bit. The interact key is here, but we want it to be kind of in front of the door for now. So I'm going to move the X axis to 90, right? That'll actually put it behind the door when we see it, because the door is going to look like this, right? Because we've rotated the door. Maybe we don't need to rotate this door anymore because we needed to do it before, but well, because it kind of opens from here. Let's see if I undo this. If I go to 1, where does it open from? Does it open from the right place? Not really. You're not going to see the door handle at all. No, I was right the first time. -1. So the door handle is going to be on the other side. At least you can see the door handle on this one. It's still not the right location. I'm not sure why KKit did it this way. I mean, I would have put the anchor on the other side, right? But that's just me. Compile and save. And so now this is the door, and we know that the interact key is behind the door. Well, so this is not right. Let's put it in front of the door so we can see it temporarily, but -90. So it should be a -90, guys. This says 90, it should be -90. 150 is correct because it's kind of like where the door is. So this is where the interact key is going to appear. Compile and save. Now let's fix the door in the level. So before we move on, we'll go back to the door. You can see it's offset because we've moved it around. So let's fix it. So we'll click onto it and we'll move it aside so that it is interacting in the right spot. There it is. And then save. Okay, so that is the door. The door is now also an interactable, right? Let's see if this works the same way that it did before. So let's press play. And I have like 3 characters here. I'm just going to shift back down to 2 just to make it so it's easier to play for me in my system. There we go. So I'm just going to run over, and then when I interact with the door, like so, then if I press kind of play, it opens, or interact. If I go back and I press it again, it closes. So that the interaction still works the way it did before. Let's also test it for the other character. So I'm just going to do that. There we go. And run over, and do the same thing. So we can see that the door opens and closes. And also, you know, it kind of does what it did before. So nothing different. The door is now an interactable. Awesome. All right, so really good stuff that we have so far, but now we need to continue. The next part is let's add some weapons. So you still don't see the E key, but we'll get it in a second. And then we're going to take a short break, right, in about 10 minutes or so. So the first thing you want to do is add in a base weapon of type base interactable. Let's make a new weapons folder. So again, I'm going to go to blueprints, and I'm going to add a new weapons folder under interactables. But before I do that, I'm going to put this up on DevOps. Git add dot. Let's say reparented door to BP underscore base interactable. That's what I probably would have put in the potion, but it is what it is. And now what I want to do is, let's make a new folder. We'll call this weapons. Right, here's the weapons folder. I want to make a base weapon, so I'm going to make a new blueprint class of type BP underscore base interactable. Here it is, right? And I'm going to call this BP underscore base weapon, right? So weapons are all going to come from this thing. The base weapon, when I open it up, the item mesh isn't going to be this. It's going to be a common sword. So sword, common, this one. Okay, that's what the sword will look like. Pretty good. Compile and save. And what I want to do with it, this thing all together, is I want to make sure that it bobs up and down. So perform item rotation, item bounce. And I don't want to add that to the door, so that's why it's not on my, by default, it's not there. Okay, so by the way, there's lots of ways of doing this thing. For example, I could have made it so that it's a check mark. It's always on, and then if I check it, it'll be like if I'll check it on. Do I want it to bounce? And so it's always on everything. But if I want it to bounce, I check on it. If I don't want it to bounce, I uncheck it. And so I don't have to do this, right? But it's just a way, another option for us. So again, back to my event graph, I want to perform item rotation because I want it to rotate, and I also want to perform item bounce. So these ones have that. So weapons and base potions, they have that. Actor overlap, no. Parent tick, I'll leave. Compile and save. So now, if I put a weapon into the level, let's go back to there and reorient. I'll put it right here in front of us. Let's just drag it in. This is what it'll look like. It's my weapon. Okay. And if I press play and I use my character and I walk over, love it. Let's try that again. If I walk over, I can see my item in its glory. Now I can interact with it, but there's no, we haven't defined what that does, right? So we can see here that it can, you know, bounce around and all that kind of stuff, but it won't clash with what I'm doing. Nice. So that's the one thing that happened. So I added in this. The next part is going to be doing a bunch of little changes. So in order for me to make this work, I need to modify the character. Where is this weapon going to go? Right? It's going to go on the right hand, right? So there are two sockets that are built in, you know, to the hand. So for now, what I want to do is I want to add two things. I want to add in a couple of variables. So let's do that. So this is in the BP underscore MP character blueprint. So back to blueprints. Here's character. I want to add in, you know, a few things. So one of them is going to be called right hand item equipped. So let's do that. And it's a Boolean. It's going to be replicated because we want to make sure it's equipped on both characters. I also want to make it part of the interactable properties. So it's going to be kind of hidden away there. Let's add the next one, which is going to be a left-hand item equipped. And we'll see how this plays into the stuff we're going to be doing with our inventory system later on this semester. Okay, so we're going to put that there. And then finally is attacking. So it's kind of an interactable property, but it's is attacking. This could also encompassing is blocking. And blocking is attacking. It's kind of the same thing for now. We may change that in the future. There we go. So all those are replicated and they're properties we can use now. Compile and save. Next, what I want to do is I want to add in two subcomponents to the mesh component, left-hand item and right-hand item. Let's do that. So again, the mesh component, add in two static meshes, and we'll say this is called right-hand item, and we'll add another one again to the mesh component called static mesh, left-hand item. left hand item. There we go. Left hand item, right hand item. The left hand item is going to have a parent socket, which is going to be the arm left socket. It's a built-in socket that's part of your character already. Arm left socket. The right hand item is also going to do that, but it's going to be the arm right socket, this one. Okay, so that's the two items. They're parented, and what that looks like is, if I just zoom out, you can see that it's already part of the character. There's the character there, and you can see that the other one is on the character's outside, right there. Those are the places where they're going to be parented. Left hand item, right hand item, right? There we go. Okay, so very good. So now that I have those, and we modified our character, one thing is that we want to make those replicated. So left hand item also needs to have a replicated. So if I type in replicated, so a component must replicate, because if it doesn't replicate, what's going to happen is the server is going to be able to see the sword in the player's hand, the other player, right? But the player won't see their own sword because it doesn't replicate, right? Because these items, even though the mesh replicates, right? So you see the component replicates, well, but guess what? These don't. So that happens is that you won't see them, but so the character themselves won't see them, but you will, which is weird. So right hand item, same thing, right? So I want to kind of replicate those two things. Compile and save. And that's why I put that here. So now that we've done that, I want to preview what this is going to look like. We need to change these things. Believe it or not, it's a weird thing that they've done, KKit. They made them massive for some reason when it comes to this. So let's go to the rogue skeleton. The way to get that is if I go to the mesh, and if I look at the mesh itself, here it is. Here's the rogue mesh. If I double click onto it, you're going to see this. I want the skeleton, which is the rogue skeleton right here. And then you can see that there's the arm right socket and the arm left socket. Let's go to the arm right socket and let's add a preview item. So add preview asset. Let's use that common sword. So sword common. And now it's massive. Look at it. It's like really massive, guys. It's like super huge. It takes up the entire person's like body, right? Kind of thing. It's like crazy big. So what we do is we modify the socket itself, not the item, right? So that it's scaled. So the relative scale, instead of it being 1, we'll make it 0.01 on all of them. 0.01 and 0.01. That's the right scale for some reason. Okay, so if I go back to the right-hand socket, you can see that now that's what the sword will look like. Yay. Same thing with the arm left socket. I'm just to be preemptive, I'm just going to put 0.01 here, 0.01 and 0.01. Let's also add a shield, because we're going to add a shield later on. Let's add a shield preview item. So I'm going to say add preview asset, and we'll say shield common, this one, right? So this is where the shield goes. See, a shield's going to go there, the arm's going to go there, and that's the preview assets for our character. Pretty good. Like, that's probably the right size. So save. So we've done those changes there. Okay, good. So now that we've done that, if we go back to, we're going to take a break very soon. We're almost there. I'm going to go to this slide here. I'm going to take a short break. I want to change my perform sphere trace so we can see that interact key. Okay, that's what I want to do. So perform sphere trace is on the character. So back to this, if I go to my interactable functions, I want to go to perform sphere trace, and at the end of this sequence line, I want to expand this, and I want to add in a cast to the interactable character to my base interactable. So I want to say cast to BP underscore base interactable. So why am I doing this? Because I want to access the interact key, that E key, right? And the interactable actor by default could be any interactable actor. Like if I look at it, it's a actor object reference, right? But we want to specifically say it's of type base interactable. Then what I want to do is I want to get the interact key. So get interact key. That's the E key, right? And I want to set the visibility, of that key. but it's going to be based on if I'm interacting or not, right? So the base interactable also knows is if the interactor is within radius. So get interactor is within radius, which is a Boolean, and we can use that Boolean. If it's in radius, we want to see it. If it's not within radius, we want not to see it. So that's if they're not looking, or if they're too far away, this is going to change that. All right, so this is something we want to add into the sphere trace. Okay, so basically if I'm in radius, I'm going to see the key. If I'm not in radius, I'm not going to see the key. That means if I'm close or not, or far away, you know, from this thing. And this is set interact key visible when close enough to interact. Set interact key visible when close enough to interact. There we go. And that's what we're going to make it. So it's this. And I'll just add in additional little things like that. Now we could have made this on another sequence line. We could have done that, but I just think that it's just, you know, a little addition, an addendum, if you will, to the perform sphere trace. So that's what this is, kind of at the end here. Compile and save. And that's what this does. So that's what the interact key does. It makes it so that it is visible if we're close enough. Okay, so now what we want to do is let's go back to the base weapon, right, blueprint, and we can make it so that it's equipable, and the equipable type is the right hand weapon. Let's do that. So base weapon, right, as an example, and then if I go here, equipable is equipable. The equipable type is a right hand weapon. There we go. And that's something that I want to state there. We want to create an equipped weapon, but before we do that, I'm just going to let's test to see if we get that E key happening. So the way it would work is I go near an interactable, and if I'm close enough, look at that, the E key happens. That's what it should look like, and it's billboarding, my friends, right? If I look away, the E key goes away. If I look back, the E key comes back. Now here's a problem. You see a problem? It's casting a shadow. we don't want the E key casting a shadow. It's not a thing, right? So we can turn that off. So that's something we should have done in the base interactable. I didn't put that in the PowerPoint. I'm so sorry. So that's going to go back into the interactable, base interactable, under the interact key. And if I type in shadow, right, we don't want it to cast shadows at all. Like this interact key itself, because it's in world space, right, it actually casts a shadow, right? So we don't want that to happen. Let's say cast. So because it's in world space, it does that. It casts a shadow, and I don't like that, right? Now we can make it so that the interactable doesn't cast a shadow, but notice that the interact key itself, because it's an object that's here. Now if I go back here, you can see there's objects here that we can say desired size. We said that you know, before, and then there's a lot of other options here that we can put in place. So the collision we turned off, we did that stuff. We could say that it's, you know, we can hide it or show it. That's something we can do. The component does replicate, but there was this one option here, receive shadows. We don't want it to receive shadows either in mobile. That's only for mobile and stuff like that. But we can also, from a rendering perspective, we don't want to, if I type in a render, I don't want it to visible to real-time captures. That doesn't make any sense. Visible and reflection captures, like it shouldn't be that. Receive decals, you know, and those kind of things. We don't want this to happen, because otherwise it's going to receive all this extra stuff, then it's going to take a lot of other things that's happening. But it doesn't have its own shadow casting. But we're going to move this anyway in a second, and we're going to see how this works. So if I go back to this, again, it casts shadows for a second, but the reason for it is because it is that key, and it should appear there too. Take a look, right? But it only appears in front of the door, and also, guess what? I can pass through the door because by default my interactables don't have any collision. So let's fix that on the door first. So again, just testing. That's why I'm doing that before we move on to the sword. So item mesh for the door only should be blocking. So if I go to collision, right now you can see that by default it ignores everything, and I don't want that to be the case. I want it to be a regular block. It'll block stuff. So what do I want it to block? So notice that world static, it ignores world dynamic, ignores pawns, physics, bodies, and vehicles, and destructibles. I want all of these to be on this side. So we're just going to uncheck these. So it's going to block all those things. That's what this item mesh is going to do, only for doors. Okay? But it's going to ignore the camera and block visibility. So compile and save. And if I press play now, let's try that out again. If I go to the door, I cannot walk through it anymore. That's important. But I can interact with it, right? I can move it. Notice that now the E key appears in front of the door, right? But only when I'm here. But what happens if I'm behind the door? Well, a couple things happen. I don't see the E key anymore, right? Because the E key is actually over here. And that's not how I want the door to work, right? I don't want that to work this way. So there's a couple of options for me. I could make it so that the door's interact key is not world space, but it's screen space. I can move this from world space to screen space, right? So that's something I could do. If I do that, right, then it only works for the door. So only for doors. So I don't have to care about the position. Position won't matter anymore because it's going to go right through objects. That's what screen space stuff does. Let's move that to screen space for a second to show you this. And now, if I go back to the door, and it doesn't matter whether I'm in front of it or not, you can see that it's there. Okay? If I open it and I go on the other side of it and I hit it, then we should be able to see it as well, right? So, but it's here. So that we can see that that the E is there when we're interacting. Okay? So here, as long as I'm facing the door, that E key is going to cut through objects and it's going to show me where it is. And it's going to appear in the spot that I told it to appear, right? Which is relative, you know, to the object itself. When I rotate the door or not, the E key is going to just appear right there. Okay? So this is kind of a weird thing. Okay? But it doesn't happen here. This is all world space. And that's why we get shadows. But you know what? I kind of like it, the screen space part. I do. I like it, right? I like it more than the world space part. So how do I change that? Well, I can go back to my base interactable, and I can go back to my interact key. And now that I've done some work, I realized that, you know what? World space isn't required. Let's go and do screen space. And if I do screen space, compile and save, then the wooden door is still screen space, but there's no little, you know, kind of default check mark. It's not there anymore, and that's okay. But if I need to do it this way, then that means that my base interactable does not need me to billboard my component. I can still have this here as an option, but I don't need it because screen space stuff automatically billboards. So I can get rid of this. So it saves me some cycles, and I can just connect my event tick to this. And just to be a stickler, I'll move this to the left. There we go. So compile and save, and let's test it out now. So now we have everything is screen space, not world space. And if I go here, it appears in screen space, no shadows. And it's automatically billboarding, which is pretty cool, right? No matter where I'm looking, it's there. And same thing with this one. And I think that's kind of the right solution, right? Because I'm interacting with it. There we go. All right, so that's pretty cool. I've made that change. So let's go back to that. So I'll say File, Save All. Again, these are all design decisions, right? I wanted to show you both those things. Git add dot. Git commit -m. We'll say changed interact key to screen space, which solves a couple problems. It doesn't cast shadows. Casting shadows, unless we want it to cast shadows, as an example, or receive shadows, is computationally expensive. So we don't want that. Okay, that's number one. And the second thing we don't want is, you know, for us to pay for the billboarding. We're paying for that billboarding every frame, right? If we're only using it the way we're using it, and it's not even showing half the time, It's okay. We can use screen space, and it's actually less computationally expensive. All right, so that's pretty cool. I like that. That's good. And let me just finish this off, and we'll take a short break, and we'll come back and finish this off. So equip weapon. We have 2 more slides for the break. Equip weapon is a new thing. I want the character instigator of type character. Let's do that. So equip weapon is on the BP base weapon. So here's our function. Character instigator is this. Of type character object reference. Character object reference. Again, it gives us more flexibility this way. Right now, if I was to make this into a BP underscore MP character, it's only for the main character. But what if I want to make this equip weapon for an enemy? It wouldn't work, right? That's why we need to be more flexible and make it like this. Next, what I want to do is make sure that it doesn't have an owner. So has owner, get has owner. Remember that has owner is part of the interactable, right? If it doesn't have an owner, branch. So this is what we're going to do. If it has an owner, I don't want it to have an owner. It's not Boolean. If it doesn't have an owner, that's what we want to say. So if this doesn't have an owner, that's good. It's not being held by somebody else, in other words, right? That's why we put this in this little check in place. Then let's make it the owner. So character instigator. So get. Oh, we call this whole thing character instigator. That's not what I wanted. This thing should have been equip weapon. You guys didn't even tell me. Equip weapon. Equip weapon. Sorry. So equip weapon. So let's get a reference to the character instigator. Get character instigator, right? If the character instigator, let's set the owner. Set owner. And I want to do it the other way around. I want to make the character instigator the owner of this weapon. That's what we're saying. So if it's true, then make them the owner, you know, as an example. And then we also want to has owner, you know, so set has owner to true. Okay. And then character instigator, we're going to cast as a BP underscore MP character for now. Cast to BP underscore MP character. If it's a character, that's what we're saying. Is this a character? If it's a character, then what do I want to do? Well, I want to save a reference to this character locally. Okay, now we know that this is gonna fail. So if I do something like, you know, promote to local variable called character, it's gonna go like might crap out, you know, as an example. Okay, it didn't. Base weapon didn't crap out, but it might. So here's my character. Compile and save. Did it crap out? It did. See? That's the problem, guys. I've proved it out twice now. It's weird. It totally is weird that it allows me to do it, and then as soon as I compile and save, it's bad things happen to good people. Just doesn't like it. It just clashes to crap. Hopefully we didn't lose too much there. And we'll take a short break, but I mean only a short break because then we're going to finish off, right? So I know it's a long video and I'm sorry about that, but it's what it is. Ugh. Okay, let's try that again. So yep. That's why I keep on making a save, because you never can tell when bad things are going to happen, right? With this stuff. It reminds me of how we used to do Blender back in the old days. Blender was a notorious for crashing at random times. It actually still does today, right? But it's not nearly as bad as Unreal Engine when it comes to C++ and doing things like what I'm doing. Character. Sorry, guys. I'm still not going to talk about it. Yeah, it can happen. That's why you have to continue saving. Because if you don't, then, you know, randomly you lose stuff you're working on, and it can be very frustrating. And some of this stuff is gotten better, has gotten better, because back in the day, you know, Unreal Engine, like UE3, oof, talk about a crashing system. A lot less stuff that it would just, as soon as you ran it, it would crash, right? So, and you wouldn't know what it was. It didn't give you great crash details. I mean, kind of like how it's not doing this now, right? So, but it was much worse. And so the tools have definitely improved over the time, believe it or not. Get character instigator. Cast to BP underscore MP character, and then we'll promote this to a local variable, but we'll call it MP character. That way it won't clash with what we're doing. There we go. And then once we've got that, the next step is to check equipable type. So get equipable type, and then switch on the equipable, whatever the equipable type is. And what we're going to say is, if it's a right-handed weapon, then character set right hand weapon item equipped to true if it's a right-handed weapon. However, if it's not, then set left-handed weapon to true. It's one or the other, right? It's either a left-hand weapon or a right-hand weapon. So it's another, these are just checks to make so we can use them for equipment handling, but also for eventually for inventory systems. Then I want to get my character, and I want to get the right-hand item. So get right-hand item, and I want to do the same thing. Get left-hand item. So right-hand item, left-hand item. And I also want to get the item mesh. So that's this item mesh. And the item mesh, I want to get the static mesh from it. Static mesh. So let's get static mesh. Get static mesh. There. So again, when you get the item mesh, you're not getting the item mesh itself. You're getting the item mesh component. You want to get the component has the static mesh inside of it, right? So that's this. Okay. And once I've done this, then I want to set the static mesh. So set static mesh. To the target. Right. And I want to do the same thing with this one. I think it's the other way around, actually. I think it's this one. Static mesh. No, I was right. Sorry, it's just the way it's been drawn. And then destroy item. We'll know in a second if it's no good, right? Okay, there we go. So that is your equip weapon. Compile and save. And then what we want to do is we want to call that as the event interact function. So back to event graph. Interact, and we want to equip weapon. Yeah, that's what this does. All right, let's try it out. So compile and save. Yay. And now that we've done that base weapon stuff, let's put this up on DevOps. Git add dot git commits -m. We'll say added equip weapon function to base weapon. So that way it's saved. We can always go back and do that and press play. So now what we should see is if I go up to this item, and if I'm close enough, you'll see the E to tell me what it is, right? So I can't do it here, but if I do it here and press E, then we should see the item. There it is. We should see the item and, you know, kind of equipped. And you see that the character sees that in the bottom right corner window, this one. You can see that the other character sees the weapon. There we are. You see that the main character has the weapon in hand and in the idle pose, right? Okay, now let's try it with the other one. So if I go into the second character, and let's see if it works too. So if I go here and if I run over to the weapon, close enough, pick it up. Now you can see that it has the weapon in place. Notice that that world space health bar does appear as a shadow right there. It's kind of ugly. That's not great. And we can fix this later. But now you can see that on this part right here, you can see that the other character also has the weapon, and they can also see their own weapon. Can't do anything with it, but they can definitely push you around like this. Woo, right? Oh yeah. I can smack that other character around because that weapon is actually like a physical thing that pokes around. There we go. All right, so that is pretty good. And that is our base weapon. This is a great place to stop. So again, I'm going to file, save all. And I'm just going to go here and git add dot, git commit -m if it allows me. I don't think there's any changes. Git status. No, nothing to commit. Because I've already committed, right? Because I didn't save anything new. Questions so far before we stop for a few minutes? So challenges that I had before we stopped are the parenting part. And it all comes down to this finicky part right here. This is where the root cause of my problem is. The root cause is, and I did this in a different order before, and that's why it worked okay. But it's just C++ if you think about it, right? So if I go to my base interactable right here, right, because I have a character variable, and it's of type MP character, right? What we did was we checked to see if it's valid. We did a validated get, but it's here. And this is the base, this superclass, right? So because this superclass is here, that means that variable is something that's inherited by the other classes. So if I go back to base potion, I put it in here for now, but let me explain here. It doesn't look like it's here, but actually if I go to to the little gear icon and show inherited variables, then you'll see that yes, indeed, there's character. You cannot have the same name. It's a clash, right? You can't have the same name for two variables, local and a local variable the same name as the global variable. The local variable will obscure or hide the global variable or the class variable, and it can't be named the same things, right? So that's why C++ doesn't like it, and so too does Blueprints doesn't like it either, right? That's why it crashes, because it's like, wait, I already have this variable in place. You're trying to state that the variable is this now. It's a local variable with the same name, and it can't be. So that was the problem. That's why I had to recreate the base potion class. Now, a couple things to note. Since we have the the character, then I'm doing this. When I cast, instead of setting character, MP character here, I can just set character, because character actually exists. So I can reset my character to something that I'm interacting with. I'm going to check to see if the character instigator can be cast. It can. And then I'll set the character. So this can be replaced. This setter, these two setters, instead of me having a local variable called MP character, could simply just be character, because I can just reuse what I already have. So this is something that I'm going to do, right? So I'm going to go here, and I can say set character, right? Because from my base interactable, you can see that character is a thing I can do. This is something that I can do there. So that can go away, right? And then I can get character from my base interactable. That's my character itself. This is from my base interactable, replicated, just like this one, right? And so I can use this one, all right? So that's something. And now I can get rid of my local variable called MP character. I don't need this anymore because I already have it. And that's why it was causing a problem. Compile and save. And now when I made that change, let's make sure I can still interact with my potion. So going back to my potion, I can still interact with it, and I can still do the same thing I did before. Okay, so that's all good. Same thing goes now with anything else like that. For example, we just made a base weapon, right? So here's my base weapon. Base weapon also has an equip weapon method. Equip weapon uses a MP character as a local variable. That's what we had there before, right? But we don't need this. We can just set the character. So set character, which is part of the base interactable class here. And then once I have that, then all these references to character is just character. So get character, this one. And I can replace these with the proper character, which is also replicated, which is much better actually than the local variable, which is nothing, right? So I'm just going to get rid of these and just use those. That's what it should be. And that was my problem, right? That was the problem that I was having. I was having this issue where I was trying to override the class variable, and that's why it was clashing. Now let's try this out again. So we always try, whenever we make changes like this, we try to make sure that if I go up to here, then I can still interact with the sword. I can still pick up the sword, right? That's important. And I'll do the same thing now because it's a networked item that has relevancy in some ways. I want to make sure that both characters can still pick up the item. There it is. So this is the item being picked up as well. And you can see that. Oops, let's go over here so you can see it. There it is. You can see the item. All right, so that's it. So that was the fix I made. So now let's make file, save all, and then we'll take a short break because that bugged me. Git add tab. Git commit -m. I'll say removed. Well, did we do it though? We didn't do it here. File, save all. Removed redundant local variable MP character. Not required. It's a bit of a refactor. And I did that because I don't want to have extra stuff for your exam where you're like, hey, wait a minute, this is like, it's MP character, what does that mean compared to character? Right, because this is the thing I'm going to give you for your exam. This is going to be your starter. All right. All right, so now that we've done this, a great place to take a short break. That was a big, long video. When we come back, and I'm only going to take like 5-10 minutes maximum, we'll come back, we'll do the shield, and then we're done. All right? Oh, sorry, we'll do the shield, and we'll do some animations, and we're done. All right?